Well, this is our last Sunday in this series that we're talking about Shalom and the restoration of Shalom into God's creation. And I don't know about you, but I'm grateful that it's the end of this series because it's been very difficult. It's been hard on me because this series has pushed me to hold in front of us some truths that we really just rather not look at because they're hard. There are some big problems facing God's creation, and the realization that we are the ones who are called to address these problems is a lot. There's a lot. We've talked about how when God, in an act of love, for the sake of love and with the breath of love, invited all of creation into being. That story that we hear way back in Genesis 1. And how creation was invited to participate in the creation itself when God said, and let the earth bring forth vegetation. And it did. And then God said, let us make humankind in our image. And God did. And God placed us, God's creation, created in God's own image, placed us into this creation and told us to live, eat freely of all of the abundance of all of this goodness that creation is. Take care of my creation. Tend to it, serve it, till it. Make sure it is taken care of. Make sure it flourishes. Just do me this one favor. Don't eat from this tree. Everything else is yours. But of course, we know the story. We know that we thought for a moment that perhaps we know more than God, or we know better than God, or maybe even that God can't be trusted to give us all that we need to live such a flourishing life. And so we eat of that fruit, of that tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what pours over us is not the knowledge of how to murder people and get away with it or any of that stuff that we think of as evil. What pours over us is fear. What pours over us is the realization that we are naked. What pours over us is the realization that we are ashamed. The realization or the misinformation or the misguided thought that we are not enough. That God is going to look at us in all our vulnerability and see us for who we truly are, this thing that is not quite enough. So we're going to have to scrabble and we're going to have to fight and we're going to have to get some stuff so that we can prove that we are indeed enough. And in that moment, we broke. We broke what God had said is very good. The state of shalom that all of creation was in, where all of the relationships within creation were right. When God's relationship with creation was right, when God's relationship with humankind was right, when humankind's relationship with creation was right, everything was good, but not good enough for us. No, we had to eat from that fruit and destroy all that was very good. And in that story of Genesis, we hear the ark and that downward slide where just a few chapters later, nation is at war with nation. And the struggle has continued ever since. But also in this story is the story of God's redemptive work in the world as God continues to call humankind, us, you and I, ordinary people, not superheroes, people, and tell them, come. Our relationship is good. Just come and believe in me. Walk in the path that I am laying before you. We can do this together. We can restore creation to that very goodness that it was when I created it. Just come and follow me. So we've looked at our role in restoring shalom because we are called, we are expected We were given vocation to tend to God's creation. We have a job to do. We've been talking about this job since forever, but specifically since Advent, when we remembered that God calls order out of chaos, that God uses God's people to draw order out of chaos, just like God called order out of chaos in those first moments of creation. And then God calls Jesus Christ to walk among us, to walk with us, and talk with us, and laugh and cry with us, and to die for us so that we will know how much we mean to the one who created us. And we continued that learning by looking at the teachings of Jesus Christ and how they equip us for this task that is laid before us. And we went on to discover and rediscover again and again that living Christ dwells within us. And that living Christ that dwells within us gives us the power to do this work that we are expected to do. And so we're looking at Shalom and trying to get a hold of what is the specific work that we're supposed to be doing. Well, we're supposed to be working to restore Shalom to God's creation. And so we started looking at some of those relationships, and of course the first one we have to look at is our relationship with God. How do we restore our relationship with God? That's the easiest one of all, because God is doing it already. God is reaching out and saying, come back. Come to me. I love you. I want you. And all we have to do is say, here I am. Here I am, God. And so we move on to the next relationship, which is the relationship with ourselves, and begin repairing that damage that happened when that fear and that shame and that realization that I am not enough, which is simply guilt run amok. So we try to remember. We do the work of remembering that the one who created us fearfully and wonderfully. That the one who created us whole. That we are enough in the eyes of the one who created us. So all this scrambling for all this other stuff is not necessary, because the one who breathed all of this into existence says, you are enough, just as you are. And then we move on to our relationship with creation. And we look around our world today and the suffering that is happening to God's creation. And we're abhorred. We can't believe this is happening. And yet we see the daunting task of correcting all of this stuff. Picking up our trash, cleaning up our mess, restoring God's creation to that state that God created it in. We begin that work, trying to understand how we can help. And then we moved into some work on shalom with others, within our families, within our community, within our world. And we remember what it says way back there when God created humankind in God's image. God created all of humankind in God's image. So we remember that when we look into the eyes of the other, when I look into your eyes, I am looking at the image of God. And how I treat that image of God is a reflection of how I love God. It's a direct reflection of how I love God. So if I disrespect, if I denigrate the image of God that is in you, I'm doing that to God, God's self. And then it got really fun. I don't know if you noticed, but I was sweating bullets the last two sermons, because this is stuff that we really don't want to look at, because there are issues with the way that we treat each other beyond our families, beyond our immediate community. There are issues in the way we treat other people because they look differently than we do. There are issues in the way that we treat other people because there is a power imbalance. Because we are not in that state of shalom as God created, where we are all children of God. We have created structures and hierarchies and stuff that says this person is better than this person. And again, we're reminded that every time we look at that other person, regardless of what language they speak or what color they are or who they love or anything, we are looking at the image of God. And how I treat the image of God is how I treat God. And then last week was, that was a good one. Because we have to look at our relationship with nation, with empire, and really examine our motivations for the things that we do. Reevaluate our priorities. Because if our priority is to build empire, if our priority is to build the greatest nation on earth, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. But at what cost? At what cost? When we do these things at the cost of humans, perhaps we need to stop and reevaluate. Perhaps we need to think about what we are doing to raise up a nation. And so today, we're talking about being witnesses to shalom. And being witness is not just seeing it and testifying about it. Being a witness is actually participating in the restoration of shalom. In this book, a lot of this series is based on the very good gospel. Lisa Sharon Harper, she talks about something early on, kind of brings out some history of the Christian faith in the Western world, specifically in the United States, around the turn of the century into the 1900s. At that time, there were a lot of things going on in this nation. At the time, there were a lot of social issues that make today's issues look like, there were a lot of social issues that were very dire. People were literally being worked to death. Working conditions and living conditions, especially in the inner cities, were horrendous. And so the church took a look at that. And the church kind of began to take two different paths. One path, we call the progressive church, chose to really emphasize the need for social change and the church's role in that, and how we should be activists for social change and social justice and all those things. Another group took a different path. That's God's business. We're not in the social change business. We're in the people change business. We're in the business of helping people understand how valuable they are to God. Helping people discover the relationship with God that God is calling them to. So we have these two paths going, and as they continued to go, they went further and further apart until we began social justice work and sacrificing that relationship. Where we began doing that work on that relationship and ignoring the social issues. Where the right path is somewhere in between, because the importance of the relationship with God and the importance of the relationship with God's creation go hand in hand if we are to live into our vocation. Our text today is a familiar text to a lot of folks because it's a parable that closes out the Sermon on the Mount. This inaugural sermon that Jesus does in the Gospel according to Matthew. And this parable tells of two builders. Let's hear these words. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall, because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against the house, and it fell. And great was its fall. So the question is, what is this rock? Jesus tells us right at the beginning, those who hear these words of mine and act on them will be like that man who built his house on a rock. Because we have a story of these two builders. This one builder takes the easy route. I'm just going to build my house here in the sand. It's not really sand, more like a dry riverbed, the wadi. It's dry season, no problem. It's easy. I don't have to lug materials up the hill to build on that rock up there. I can just take it right out here. It's easy to dig, get the footers going. We'll have a house in no time. But the other does the hard work. The hard work of lugging those materials up that hill, the hard work of chipping away at the stone so the house can get a footing, and builds that house. Because the one who builds the house on the rock knows what's coming, can see what's happening, can see over the horizon in that storm that's coming, just as sure as any storm. And so when that storm comes, floods that dry riverbed, there goes that easy house. And the one that stands is the one that took all of this hard work. So these words of mine that Jesus is referring to in this parable are all of these words of the Sermon on the Mount. And in this sermon, we can hear how we are to be restorers of our relationship with God and the practices that we do in worship and in prayer and almsgiving and all those things. We hear how we can restore shalom with each other and the ways that we treat each other and the ways that look at the law of Moses not as the hard boundaries but as indicators of who we are supposed to be rather than what we are supposed to be. Because it's not enough just to not kill somebody. That's not enough. Anybody can, well, most people can just not kill somebody, but what Jesus calls us to do is to be different. Because if you're at the point where you're trying to decide, should I kill them or not, you've missed the point. You got off the rails somewhere way back there. You need to get back on the rails. And this sermon opens with something that we know as the Beatitudes, the blesseds. And in most of our translations, it's translated either as blessed are or happy are. And both of those are valid. Pretty genuine, good translation of that word in Greek. But that word in Greek, as in most Greek words, has depth to that meaning. And that word in Greek has a depth to that meaning that points to this, that points to shalom. Because when I hear blessed are, what does that mean? What does it mean to be blessed? What does it mean to be blessed by God? Any takers? How about we know wholeness? How about we know well-being? How about we know right relationship? How about we know peace? How about we know shalom? So maybe we could read these Beatitudes in a slightly different way. And maybe we can hear in these Beatitudes a description of who we are to be. Not the things that we're supposed to do, but who we are created to be. And as you hear these Beatitudes, listen. Listen for those relationships that are being restored as we are these people. Shalom belongs to the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Shalom belongs to those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Shalom belongs to the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Shalom belongs to those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Shalom belongs to the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Shalom belongs to the pure in heart, for they will see God. Shalom belongs to the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Shalom belongs to those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And shalom belongs to y'all. When people revile y'all and persecute y'all and utter all kinds of evil against y'all falsely on my account. Perhaps these are the teachings, these words of Christ that we are to build upon. These words of Christ that should trigger within us the remembering that this is who we are created to be the merciful, to be the peacemakers, to be the ones who hunger and thirst for righteousness sake. This is who we are created to be. So yeah, we're kind of called to be activists. We're called to stand up against those things that destroy shalom, just as we are called to stand up for those things that build shalom up. Because this is our vocation. It's our purpose. It's our mission. And I'd like to share with you a mission. The mission of this congregation. The mission that came out of discussion amongst the leaders who God has called to lead this congregation. And our mission here at Central Christian Church is to grow our faith and live our faith and share our faith together. Because in this mission, we find that balance. In this mission, we discover that, yes, our relationship with God is very, very important. And so we grow in that relationship with God by growing in our faith. And our relationship with God's creation is indeed very, very important. So we live into that mission through living our faith, acting in the world as God has called us to act, and then we share this with others so that they too know that they were created wonderfully and fearfully by a Creator who loves them and longs for them to be. So why is this our mission? Our mission is this because we believe that growing, living, and sharing our faith together is how we share God's love and what God is doing in our lives. Because this good news of Jesus Christ is transformational. It changes you. It changed me. It is changing you. It continues to change me each and every day. It is transformational. And it's joyful. And it begs to be shared. So, how do we do this? We do this through the experiences of worship here together, where we reveal God to the world and to one another. Through prayer and study, where we deepen our relationship with God by being a part of a small group who is committed to growing in faith together. And by participating in ministries that use the gifts and resources that God has placed before us. so that we can share God's love and so that we may serve God's creation. And then finally, what we do. What we do is we create, support, and participate in ministries that provide opportunities for people to grow, live, and share their faith. Does all this make sense? It's all pretty clear. If it doesn't make sense yet, don't worry, because we're about to lay into it for the next whole bunch of weeks. Because our next sermon series, we're going to be talking a lot about these ministries that we create, support, and participate in. Falls under this umbrella that we know as M28, based on Matthew 28, go and make disciples of all the nations, all the peoples. And in this ministry, we have a number of teams of people who come together and perform acts of ministry together. And so next week, we're going to begin with this worship ministry team because, hey, they got to plan this, so they get to go first, right? So we're going to talk about the worship ministry, and this series is not about how we do it. The series is about why. Why is worship important? Why is it important for God's people to participate in worship? All of those questions. But there will be opportunities for you to learn about the how and the what and how you can be a part of these ministries. So once we talk about worship, then we're going to move outside, out into the parking lot, out into the hallways, out by the coffee cart that is yet to be brought back up after COVID. We're going to talk about that First Impressions ministry, that ministry of folks who welcome people onto the property and into this space and let them know that, yes, they are indeed a valued child of God and they are welcome to discover that here. And then we're going to move into the follow-up ministry, a group of folks who pick up from the first impressions and escort people through what it takes to become a part of this community, getting them connected with a small group, getting them connected with the family life ministry, getting them connected with all the ministries that they need in order to grow into disciples. Then we go into the small groups ministry, that group of folks who put together opportunities to do that thing so that we can be a part of a small group of people who are dedicated to growing in our faith. And then into the family life, that ministry that serves and looks after all those young families, the parents, the children, the youth, and helps them as they struggle to do that juggling act of life and school and extracurricular activities, and in the midst of it, trying to keep faith at the center of their life. And then into CCU, Central Christian University, that ministry that puts together opportunities for people to really dive in deeper into the tenets of our faith, to have those discussions that are hard to have anywhere else, like, why does God let this happen? Because if we can't ask those questions here, where can we ask them? Well, Facebook, but you know how that goes. And then we're going to take a break from our local ministries, and we're going to take a look at one that is an outreach. It's called the Transitional Ministry. It's a ministry that takes everything that we are here, everything that we're learning here, everything that we're discovering about how we can be God's people together and do the work of the vocation that God has given us, taking all of that and sharing it with other congregations that are struggling with identity and struggling with purpose, so that they too can rediscover their purpose, rediscover their identity, and rebuild into a center for the community, a center of faith where people can once again find hope in the good news of Jesus Christ. And then finally, write this date down. See some pencils moving. October 3rd. October 3rd, we'll talk about the outreach ministry, those who reach out into the community to invite people in. And on that day, the outreach team is putting together a festival. on October 3rd to follow second service. And so write that date down, October 3rd, because October 3rd is the day you're going to invite a friend to come to worship with you. And you're going to invite them to come worship, and you're going to invite them to stay after and enjoy some fun and some music and some food and some games or whatever it is that they put together. I didn't see a whole lot of pencils moving. October 3rd, or type it in your phone or something, invite someone to come and be with you. See, they're ahead of the game. They've already invited someone. Good job. So we do all of these things because through these ministries, we are creating a space where folks can come and discover that they are beloved children of God. They can discover that they have been created with purpose, with vocation, with a direction for their life, with a connection with the one who created them, who wants them to know that they are enough. So let us pray. Creator God, we continue to be humbled that you call us over and over and over again to come to you, to know your love, and to be equipped to be your servants in your creation. God, the task that is laid before us is large. It is daunting. But we are not afraid. Because even though this ocean is so large and our boat is so small, we know that you are at the helm and that you will guide us safely to the shores where we will once again experience your shalom in all of your creation. And as we traverse this ocean, God, we know that you are with us, and we know that you give us strength and courage. So we thank you, and we love you. And we pray all of this in Jesus' holy name. Amen.